Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church Online Worship. My name is Julia Jones, and I'm the ministerial intern here at Beverly Unitarian. I'm so glad to welcome you to worship today. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation of children, youth, and adults of many races, religions, identities, experiences, and traditions. Here, we celebrate a diversity of beliefs, striving always to make space for more. All of you are sacred, and you are welcome here. Whatever your past or present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. Like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we affirm 7 principles, which aren't doctrine or dogma, but are shared values, a moral guide. To learn more about these principles, please visit the website of our denomination at uua.org. Our minister here at Beverly is the Reverend David Schwartz. We especially welcome visitors, and Reverend David and I both hope you'll stay for the virtual coffee hour after the service on Zoom, using the link that will be shared at the end of the service. We look forward to the day when we'll be able to meet you in person. Although we currently remain distanced physically, we can stay connected. Check out our Facebook page and our website. Contact the office to receive our monthly newsletter and to get our Friday email blast. Now, let us join together in spirit and prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
New Year's in January has always seemed like an arbitrary time to actually start a new year. It's not connected to the solstice, which is already come and gone. It's not really connected to the start of something like a new school year or new season. It was winter at the end of December. It's still winter now. At best, it's the start of a new period for bookkeeping and taxes. But it is a beginning. It's a marking of time that divides a before from an after, however arbitrary that moment might be. Nonetheless, something is different before and after. That's inauguration, too. The start of a new presidency, the start of a new Congress. An arbitrary moment, and nonetheless, a division in time, a demarcation of a before and an after. This has been already a year full of years. No. That's inauguration, too. In the midst of everything, in the midst of a pandemic that goes on and a world that feels like it's still on fire, it's right for us nonetheless to make a new beginning, to take a moment, to take a breath, to mark a before and an after. Our words for the chalice lighting are by Barbara Crooker, called The New Year, and I feel finally 3 weeks into it like I can take a breath and relax and let this thing actually start now. The new year. When a door bangs shut, a window doesn't open, sometimes it slams your fingers. God often gives us more than we can handle. A sorrow shared is a sorrow multiplied. There's a bottle of champagne waiting to be uncorked, but it's not for you. Nobody wants another poem. The prize-winning envelope has someone else's name on it. This year you already know you're not going to lose 10 pounds. How can you feel hope? How can you feel hope when the weight of last year's rejections is enough to bury you? Still, the empty page craves the pen, wants to feel the black ink unscrolling on its skin. In spite of everything, you sit at your desk and begin. Friends, in spite of everything, we enter our service together, sitting at our desks and beginning again.
Hey, you guys, Lea here. So I must be among millions, if not billions of people who tuned in to the inauguration yesterday on January 20th, 2021. And I was inspired by every moment of it, but especially wrapped and lifted, exalted, just completely fixated and moved by Amanda Gorman's poem, her presence, her beauty, her artistry. And so this song was born. There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to see it. There is always a light. There is always in the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a climb this hill. Together we will. There is always shine your light. There is always shine. There is always shine your light. There is always shine. Be the light.
Friends, will you join me in the words of our covenant? Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Sit. Oh, come here, little guy. Hey. What? Pilot, you want to hear a story? Do you know much about Roman mythology? Pilot, do you know why January is called January? Do you know that it's January right now? I don't think he knows. Pilot, it's called January because of the Roman god Janus. In ancient Rome, 2,000 years ago and more, there was a god of beginnings for new things that were starting, and there was a god of endings for old things that are coming to their finish. But pup, these were not actually two separate gods. These were the same god with two faces, one looking forward toward the future, and one, can you look this way for a second? No. You're a one-faced dog. And one that looked backwards towards the past, both on the same head, looking both ways at once. Janus was pictured that way because the idea was that beginnings and endings are woven together, and that a threshold, the place like the doorframe that you step through, can go in either direction. It's not guaranteed only to go forwards, and sometimes we go forwards by looking backwards, back and forth. Beginnings and endings are woven together. Janus gave his name to January, the first month of the year, of course, a time that we mark by looking back and looking forward too. Similarly to this week in our country was inauguration. A new president became president, took the oath of office, promised to do good work and a good job to the best of his ability. And something new starts when that happens. It's a time both for looking forwards and for looking backwards. And so right here in the middle of the year, in this dark moment, maybe it's right to have a God who looks both ways at once. At this time of year, when we're mostly stuck inside our houses, where we were already mostly stuck anyways from pandemic, it's an opportunity to look backwards and to look forwards. And that's not just work for grown-ups to do, that's something for you too, whatever age you are, to think back over this last year behind us and say, what was good? What am I grateful for? What are the things that made me glad? What are the things that I want to bring with me into the future? And then to look ahead to the year that's coming, to say, what are the things I hope for? What are the things I want to do? What's the sort of person or the sort of dog that I want to be in this year that's coming? And so we look to the past in order to make our way into the future, just like Janus did. Right?
Dear friends, most of you know that I was born and raised in and around Washington, D.C. What you may not know is that I spent years studying political science, both at Penn State as an undergrad and at George Washington University and the University of Maryland as a graduate student. My interest in our political life as a country, as an extended community, runs deep and is part and parcel of my understanding of our principles as Unitarian Universalists. It was not just as a partisan, which I admit to, that I've watched these events of the last few days, but as a student of collective organization, decision-making, community response, human care and management, and finally, as a student of the human heart and the mystery of how to live together in what I hope will be increasing peace, driven by what I pray will become increasing justice. The ceremony around the change of presidential leadership is bound up with history, tradition, and all that comes with our collective history and our shared traditions. In playing out those customs, the ceremonies signal many things about us collectively, about our country, about our commitment, and about our endurance. In having the day of ceremony, though, we also signal that this is one of those moments where we have absolute freedom to believe that we can do something new, that we can make something better, that we can change things. It is important to recognize that those things are true every day, but maybe because they're true every day, they tend to fade into the background and get lost in the mundane, or in the case of a global pandemic, because we're really busy just surviving. I invite you now, in these early days of a new administration, in a new beginning, whether it was the one you wished for or not, to consider allowing yourself that hope and taking a moment to consider what believing it was a first day for that endeavor would mean for you. What would it mean to believe that we, our country, our communities, and our hearts are, in the words of National Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, not broken, simply unfinished? It is my prayer today, on this 1-year anniversary of the first diagnosis of COVID in Illinois, that we might see this new day as one both of hope and determination. I pray that we continue to find the resiliency to face our losses and our grief while we tend to ourselves, our neighbors, and our city. I pray that we commit ourselves to honestly confronting the walls that we build between ourselves and those we deem to be other, and that we move forward with compassion, with tenderness, and with a refusal to leave anyone behind. I pray that the fresh start to which we have access in this moment allows us to find creativity, flexibility, and a willingness to listen, even when the language we hear makes us uncomfortable or angry. I pray that these next 100 days can be days not just of healing, as so many urge us to do, but of accountability, not just of natural calming, but of justice, not just of unity, but of reconciliation through deep listening and reckoning and grappling with who we are in America and what is true in this moment. I pray for all of us to feel the hope of a new start. I pray for all of us to deeply desire that newness touches everyone. I pray that rhetoric gives way to action from all and for all. I pray that we look back on this day and determine that the fragile hope that we may be nurturing in ourselves was, in fact, warranted, precious, and divine. Finally, I pray that we carry the contradiction of hope and the tremendous work that lies ahead with compassion towards ourselves and one another. May we act in the spirit of the interdependent web of which we each are an enduring and inextricable part now and always. May it be so.
We live full lives, and throughout our weeks, we have experiences of joy and of sorrow. This is the time in the service when we entrust these into each other's hands so that we don't carry them alone. We don't have to go it all by ourselves. If you have a joy or a concern to share, I invite you to add it in the chat now, remembering that the chat is public, or to type simply I, as if you were raising 2 fingers in silence to light a candle.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild reconcile and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round. Oh my soul, friends to me gathered round. Oh my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends, all pain and sorrow meant, with thanks unto the end I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end I will sing. What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul.
How are we, how are you, to survive in this world without forgetting who you're called to be, how you're called to be, the life you're called to live? You know the story of the Exodus from Egypt. You know the story of Moses who fled Egypt and was tending his flocks and making a nice life for himself as a shepherd. This is post-Egypt, pre-burning bush. New town, new family, new son, new life, new job. The status quo in Egypt had gone right back the same as it ever was, unchanged. Masters and slaves and great ignorant masses of citizens asleep to injustice. And that could have been, should have been, the end of the story. Moses was done. He was out. That's when the story would end. He lived happily ever after. And then, even when he saw the burning bush, he could have kept on walking. You've spent time in this city. You have walked past stranger things than a burning bush and kept on going. He had a busy day, he had a busy life, he had a wife, a little kid. He should have kept his head down and kept on going, but he didn't. As the story goes, maybe just as a narrative device, when he saw the bush, He sees this thing on fire out of the corner of his eye, and he speaks, he says to himself, out loud, to himself and his sheep, "Now let me turn aside. Now let me turn aside, that I might see this great sight. Let me turn aside. Let me turn aside. Let me pause from the routine and the rut of my ordinary days to turn aside, to notice something." In the early Jewish commentaries on the story, one rabbi says it is this turning aside, this twisting of a stiff neck, this willingness to encounter something unknown, this turning toward a new possibility, that in itself is the reason why the Holy spoke to Moses in that place, because he lifted his eyes, because he turned his head, because he was willing to be changed, to step out of what he knew and expected and into something different. Only when he turned his head in this story did God speak to him. Only when he turned his head did God remember to Moses that the shepherd was of one family with a people enslaved, and that his people called out for a great turning, which was his to participate in, not to be set apart from. The words of the story in Exodus aren't a dictation from a divine author. They aren't a haphazard retelling. These Jewish scriptures are the products of centuries of authoring and editing and debate and decision. So if there is a line in there, even if it's a baffling one, even if it's a strange one, even if it's something that doesn't seem like it needs to be there, it's there on purpose. Now let me turn aside. Now let me turn aside that I may see this great sight. It's not there just to be a description of what Moses did. It's there to be a reminder of what is possible for any of us. A reminder that on any ordinary day in an ordinary life filled with all the ordinary things, nonetheless we can turn, nonetheless something different is possible. It says that change doesn't just happen to us. We aren't actors or puppets or pawns. Change happens inside of us too. And while all this may be one single line in a 3,000-year-old story, it reminds us there is no escape from Egypt without a turning aside inside of ourselves. The world is not frozen, not given, not stuck on rails, and change for a nation of people starts when we as people, when we the people, choose to turn towards something new, to turn back towards something old in new light. We can lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but to what stands before us. There are little things that catch in the ear for each of us. The musician hears the off-key note. The teacher sees in the student's eyes that quickest flash of a look of not comprehending. The cook tastes the absence of salt, tastes the squeeze of lemon that wasn't added but should have been. And in the reporting on the inauguration, I heard this, which stuck in my preacher's ear. This from the podcast, The Daily. First we'll hear the new president speak, and then the reporters commenting on it.
Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal, that we're all are created equal, and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart.
There's a real sense in this speech that he can kind of will it into being somehow. It feels like this was not so much an inauguration speech as a kind of sermon, right? a sermon to an angry and divided country. There's not a single reference to a policy in this speech, right? It's not about an agenda. It is a kind of wartime message to a profoundly polarized America.
I thought that also. I got flashbacks to my father, who's a pastor, and can sometimes copy and paste some of the portions of this speech. I mean,
Friends, what I hear in that laugh, though I understand it, what I hear in that laugh is despair. Despair for the possibility of change. Despair for the whole notion that our democracy is a reflection of our hearts and not merely our policies. Despair that someday a change is going to come. Despair that the choices we make don't matter. We are ground to dust, each of us under the system, and that's all that matters. Despair that our nature even has better angels in it. My ears are 4 years unused to a president proclaiming hope over despair, change over stagnation, progress over status quo, but I know what hope sounds like. My ears are 4 years unused to hearing a poet call from the Capitol that we might merge mercy with might and make love our legacy and change our children's birthright. But I know what hope sounds like. Turn your head aside. Another world is possible. And we are not broken, but unfinished. Since Roosevelt, at least presidents have made a plan for their first 100 days, a policy plan, a program plan, an executive order plan. You've watched this maybe start to unfold these first few days of the new administration, one thing after another. Since Roosevelt, at least presidents have made a plan for their first 100 days. And if this was a different year, you might hear me invite you to do the same right now in another moment in time. I might charge you to make that sort of a plan. I might say, how will you speak up and show up differently in these next 100 days? How will you live your life differently? What's your list of priorities? What's your to-do list? What's your plan for your first 100 days? Maybe we'll do that next January. But today, I remember it is easier to make a to-do list than to turn toward hope. It's easier to set goals than actually to believe another world is possible. Our to-do list for these first 100 days starts by turning our heads, breaking out of our ruts, taking a breath, and listening to hope. We gather in this community to do the simple and holy and difficult work of becoming people. We gather in this community so that we do not forget who we are called into becoming. We gather so that through the storm, through the night, we have hands to lead us home, to offer, as the poet says, hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? That's the ground and the grounding. That's the hope that comes before the to-do list. That's the blank page spread out before us, that whatever we fill it with, the surface we write on is a surface that can imagine a new day and send us boldly towards it together. Amen.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Our words for benediction, a last good word to send you out to the world in this new year, are by the poet John O'Donohue, called For a New Beginning. In the out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time it's watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises of sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight. When your courage kindled and out you stepped onto a new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm. for your soul senses the world that awaits for you. Friends, in the midst of a dark and a cold season, in the midst of a season of pandemic, in the midst of a season where nothing's especially changed from one day to the next, nonetheless, today we do mark a new beginning, a new year, a new start. Go out into this world carrying hope with you. Then make your to-do lists. Amen. Go in peace.